For Ian Sanderson, the release of a damning parliamentary report condemning the organisers of the ill-fated Kimberley ultramarathon was a bittersweet moment. Fire had engulfed his sister Kate and fellow competitor Cheria Pitt in the race last September. They were simply unable to outrun the flames, which left them near death with horrific burns. Ian Sanderson says the report finally lays bare the failings of the race organiser, Racing the Planet, and opens at least the possibility of a government ex gratia payment to those whose lives were catastrophically changed forever. I spoke with him earlier. Mr Sanderson, thanks very much for your time. You've said that the findings were a vindication of everything that you and the victims have been saying since September. It probably was a vindication, but it wasn't a final victory, or not yet at least, was it?
Obviously, there's still a lot more to be done, but I would say that we have, through this inquiry, brought out in the open a huge body of evidence, if you like, a lot of facts that otherwise we could probably never have had access to.
Now, when you read the report and the findings and the range and scale of the omissions by the race organisers, were you surprised by that?
I was horrified because it actually went further than what I had personally suspected and from my own reading of the evidence.
Do you think there is any real prospect of Racing the Planet making an offer to Kate Sanderson and Cheria Pitt?
To be honest, I have no idea, but their track record to date, which is to be belligerent, to be long on rhetoric and short on reality, I would expect that to continue, to be honest.
Because you posed, I think, what was a rhetorical question yesterday when you said, hasn't Kate suffered enough? Do you think there's any real prospect that she'll be spared the future suffering of having to go through a legal ordeal to try and extract some compensation from them? I
think there's two parts to that. First of all, Kate's suffering will continue for the rest of her life. That's, and sadly, the inevitability of the sort of injuries that she and Cheria have faced. The prospect of a legal dispute, a fight, especially against an organisation where you don't actually know where that might take place, is something that I think all of us would wish to avoid. All it is bad publicity for everybody. It's a painful process, an expensive process, potentially counterproductive. From the point of view of whether or not Racing the Planet would wish to do anything differently, to be honest, that's entirely in their hands, but it is always possible that their hands may be tied by the legal advice they've been given, or even by, if it exists, the insurers behind them who would stand to lose.
Kate has spent the last almost 12 months recovering from this, what is a real catastrophe for her. What's still ahead of her?
We still don't know what is the future of her left foot, to be honest, because the surgeons appear to be undecided on what is the best approach there. Her hands are, she's decided, are a second priority, that she wants her mobility back first and foremost. And then, of course, the majority of her body, which is covered by skin grafts, they offer problems all of their own. But for somebody whose life was dedicated to outdoor pursuits and activities and adventurous activities, the change is complete.
So she's facing more rehabilitation, more operations, just to gain the very basic levels of mobility and use?
Yes.
Still a lot of hard days ahead then, aren't there?
There certainly are, yes.
The state government is now going to consider the inquiry's recommendation for an ex gratia payment. Do you have any sense of how much that should be? What would Kate and Cheria Pitt need, do you think, for it to make any difference to them at all?
To be honest, I have no idea. Firstly, I'm not an expert in this, but secondly, the question of compensation was never an objective of the inquiry. And the offer made yesterday, or recommended to be made yesterday, came as a complete surprise. The objectives were to ascertain the facts, identify the timeline, what happened when, and who did what, and to then learn the lessons and start putting in place the mechanisms to protect future entrants, to ensure that extreme events like this can and will happen again, but with a better measure of safety so that the risk is better understood and all people involved can enjoy an experience which is demanding on them as personal individuals, but without being exposed to risks that frankly are completely unacceptable.
If government compensation wasn't the aim, what is the real value of those findings to Kate? Is it a sense that people now understand? Is it a sense that people care? What do you think it is?
It is, yes, because when I first saw her in hospital back in November last year, part of it was the feeling of dismay, confusion, abandonment, because this had happened in September and there we were 2 months later. And still, it appeared that nobody was actually looking into it. Nobody was following up. And at least this way, we can understand that things did go wrong and that a number of human failings were contributing factors. And a number of these recommendations do suggest looking at, for example, changing the law, changing process, changing procedures. So all of those would give you a feeling that at least perhaps your own suffering would not be completely in vain. And if one event takes place in the future where things go wrong, and as a result of these measures, somebody's life is saved, then that has to be something that's worth fighting for.
Mr. Sanderson, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.